I always thought if I made it to retirement, I'd feel something like peace, maybe even pride. 40 years is a long damn time to give to any one place, let alone a bank. But as I stood there, champagne flute in hand, staring out across the sea of smiling colleagues and clapping executives, all I felt was numb, like I was watching a man I used to be from somewhere far away. "Let's raise a glass to Marcus Langford," my division head, Cheryl, beamed from the podium. The steady hand that guided West Bay Trust through 4 recessions, 2 acquisitions, and a technological overhaul that changed our institution forever. More applause, cheers, some laughter. I forced a nod and a small smile. After all, I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times. I even practiced my modest chuckle in the mirror, but I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting toward the round table near the stage, my family's table. Cassandra sat there, draped in a sleek navy dress, silver blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, hands folded around a wine glass she hadn't touched. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. To her right, our daughter Brielle, ever the image of her mother, filmed with her phone in one hand, eyes flicking toward me with unreadable calculation. She wore her courtroom expression, the one she used on opposing counsel when she already knew she was going to win. Next to her sat Travis, shoulders slouched in a $1,000 suit he didn't buy. He offered a lazy grin, the same grin he used to talk himself out of trouble growing up, except now it looked more smug than charming. Something was off. Cassandra had been strangely sweet these past few weeks. She brought me coffee in bed, hazelnut, my favorite, suggested a weekend trip to Napa, even laughed at a story I told her twice before. I thought maybe retirement had softened her. Now I knew better. When the speeches were over and the laughter began to die down, I made my way toward them. Cassandra stood, her smile sharpening as I approached. "Congratulations, darling," she said, placing her hand lightly on my arm. Her voice was soft. "Practiced. Yeah, congrats, Dad." Travis lifted his glass, his tone syrupy with something that wasn't quite sincerity. 40 years, that's a lot of time to do the same thing. I nodded, swallowing my discomfort. It was never just a job. Brielle smiled without teeth. "We have a gift for you," she said. "A little something to mark your new beginning." Cassandra opened her designer purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slid it across the white linen table with 2 fingers, the gesture elegant and surgical. I stared at it for a beat too long. My hand hesitated. "What's this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Just open it," Cassandra urged. Her tone dipped in honey. "We wanted to make this transition as smooth as possible." I reached for it. Brielle subtly angled her phone, recording. Of course she was. I pulled the tab and opened the flap. Inside, divorce papers, asset transfer forms, pension redirection authorizations, all pre-filled, awaiting just one signature. Mine. Cassandra leaned in, her voice low. "One signature, Marcus, that's all it takes. Then you can walk away free." I looked at her. Really looked. Not the woman I married. Not the woman who once cried when I brought home a rose without a reason. This woman wore calculation like perfume. Travis let out a small laugh. "You don't need all that retirement money, right? You'll be, what do they call it, unburdened." "Unburdened," Cassandra repeated with a nod. Brielle pushed the pen across the table. Not just any pen. The Montyrex, the one she gave me for our 25th anniversary. Elegant. Silver. The words "to Marcus with forever love" engraved along the barrel. I picked it up. I could feel Brielle zooming in with her camera, hungry for the reaction. Shock, rage, humiliation. But I gave them none of that. Instead, I uncapped the pen slowly. My fingers didn't tremble. I signed each document with the calm of a man who had already grieved this betrayal long ago. When I was done, I placed the pen gently back on the table, clicked the cap closed, slipped it into my breast pocket. "Understood," I said quietly. Stood, buttoned my jacket and gave them one last look. "I'll have my office cleared by morning." Cassandra smiled in relief. That would be best. She was already scrolling through vacation listings on her phone before I even turned to walk away. They thought they'd won, that they'd gutted me clean, taken everything worth anything, and left me hollowed. But I'd seen this coming 15 years ago, and I had prepared. The apartment in La Jolla didn't exist. Not officially. It was tucked above a quiet art gallery, 2 blocks from the water, accessible only through a coded gate and an unmarked stairwell. No mailbox, no doorbell. Rent paid through a shell company listed under a dead lawyer's trust in Delaware. I stood at the window, watching the hazy sun dip behind the ocean, casting gold across the waves. The streets below were peaceful, early joggers, latte drinkers, unaware of the war I was about to unleash. 15 years. 15. That's how long I'd been preparing, and it all started on our 25th anniversary. Cassandra had planned the whole thing. Dinner at a waterfront restaurant, a suite overlooking the harbor, champagne chilled to the exact temperature she liked. We danced to the same song from our wedding, and for a few moments I believed we still had something worth holding on to. But that night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't the type to snoop, at least not back then, but something in my gut, some old survival instinct from my army days, told me to look. The messages were from Edward Carlson, our financial advisor and supposedly one of my oldest friends. But they weren't talking about stock options. They were talking about me. Once he retires, we move everything. It's all set up. You'll be free. He won't see it coming. He still thinks we're best friends. Make sure he signs the pension paperwork when the time comes. I sat there in stunned silence, the words swimming across the screen like poison ink. They weren't just sleeping together. They were planning a quiet execution. Financial, emotional, reputational. They were preparing to erase me, and that was the moment I stopped being the man Cassandra married. I never confronted her. What would that have changed? Instead, I smiled, kissed her forehead, made love to her that night like it meant something. Then the next morning, I began building the real Marcus Langford. It started small, research, shell companies, offshore banking structures. I took trips under the guise of bank conferences to set up foundations in Panama and Zurich. I read financial law like scripture, built passive systems with nested protections. Even the IRS would need years to untangle the web. Next, I bought properties in different cities: Detroit, Austin, Asheville, Reno. Modest, paid in cash, listed under different LLCs with nonsense names: Blue Wire, Argent Key, Parallax Ventures. Each property held something: documents, backup hard drives, alternative IDs, sealed safes, satellite uplinks, redundant systems, like a military operation. Because in truth, that's exactly what it was. Most people at the bank thought I was just another mild-mannered numbers guy. They didn't know my life started in a very different uniform. Before banking, I served in Army intelligence, trained in counter-surveillance and psychological ops. I could disappear in hostile territories, flip enemy informants, disrupt communications for days without leaving a trace. Back then, strategy wasn't a department. It was life or death. That part of me had been sleeping for years, until Cassandra and Edward woke him up. And once I was awake, I never closed my eyes again. Now, in that La Jolla apartment, I opened the steel cabinet beneath the floorboard and retrieved the encrypted laptop. 3 monitors flickered to life. One showed the bank's server architecture. Another showed the location tags from my family's phones: Cassandra at the house in Pacific Heights, Travis in a downtown poker lounge, Brielle at her office near the courthouse. The last monitor displayed a countdown: 0-0-1, 47, 32, 2 days until the first automation batch deployed. I entered the password, an old military cipher only Raymond and I used, and launched Project Checkmate. First, I confirmed the diversion funds had cleared to their holding zones offshore. Next, I checked the evidence packages, recordings, emails, and account transfers, each pre-scheduled for staggered delivery to the SEC, IRS, and several state bar associations. Then I clicked open the red folder. It contained 15 years of preparation, Brielle's private conversations where she bragged about burying exculpatory evidence in 3 legal cases. Travis's siphoning of Langford trust funds to cover gambling debts. Edward's backdoor dealing. With client portfolios, Cassandra's forged authorizations to move my pension to their shell. And finally, the full chat archive between Cassandra and Edward, complete with financial charts, real estate plans, and a spreadsheet labeled Post-Marcus. Breakdown. They thought I was too dull, too trusting, too slow. I was none of those things. They'd been playing checkers their whole lives. I was playing chess, and I was already 10 moves ahead. I sat back in my chair, sipping cold coffee, watching the seconds tick away on the screen. The final move wasn't anger. It was patience. When you've already grieved the people you once loved, there's nothing left but precision. They thought the retirement party was their victory lap. They didn't know it was their opening move in a game they had already lost. 3 days after the retirement party, I disappeared. Not in the dramatic pack a bag and board a plane kind of way. No, my disappearance was far more elegant, surgical, almost invisible. The kind of vanishing act you only notice when the walls begin to collapse and no one is left to blame but a ghost. Cassandra woke up that morning in our Pacific Heights house and reached for her usual morning ritual. Her phone, then the tablet, then her espresso. But this time the tablet wouldn't unlock. Her email passwords failed. The shared account app showed a blank balance. She called out my name once, twice. Then, again, louder. I wasn't there. Not in the kitchen, not in the study, not in the garage. Not even a note. Only the hollow echo of silence and the last cup of coffee I ever made her, still sitting cold on the marble counter. Across the city, Edward Carlson tried logging into his investment account dashboard and was met with a flashing red message. This account has been frozen pending federal review. His heart probably skipped. It would have gone full cardiac when he checked his Cayman holdings next. Same message. When he tried to call his attorney, he got voicemail after voicemail. One lawyer called him back, only to say, "I can't represent you anymore." At Cassandra's house, chaos was setting in. She was pacing barefoot across the polished wood floors, redialing me over and over. Straight to voicemail. My number was no longer in service. Brielle arrived 10 minutes later, heels clicking like gunfire across the tile. "I just got 3 anonymous complaints at the office," she barked. "One to HR, one to the ethics board, and one directly to Judge Merriman. They're saying I buried evidence. How the hell would anyone know that?" Cassandra didn't answer. She had just discovered the second mortgage notice on our house, one she never signed, never saw, never even suspected existed. "How long has Dad been gone?" Brielle asked, suddenly quieter. Cassandra swallowed. "Since this morning." "No," Brielle said slowly. "I mean, really gone." Back in La Jolla, I watched it all unfold on my 3 monitors. I didn't feel joy. Not really. But I did feel the truth, the rare, heavy kind that settles deep in your bones. The kind that tells you they never saw you for who you were. And now they're going to. I leaned back in my chair and clicked open the final automation folder. Batch 1, Exposure. The packages went out like clockwork. Edward's SEC filings were sent directly to the Office of Compliance. Travis's financial logs, his coded wire transfers to an illegal betting network, were forwarded to his employer's fraud division. Brielle, his recordings, her voice boasting about manipulating trial evidence to guarantee convictions, were submitted to the State Bar Complaint Portal, attached to 3 sealed court files, all time-stamped, all watermarked, all indisputable. For 6 months, I'd let them think they were winning. I'd smiled through dinners, kissed Cassandra on the cheek, asked Travis about his non-existent startup, let Brielle interrupt me at every conversation. I gave them the illusion of control, while I recorded every whisper and planned the timing to the hour. Travis had no idea the Langford family real estate trust had already been dissolved and reconstructed under a dummy board. His name was scrubbed weeks ago. The properties he thought were waiting for him, his inheritance, had new deeds filed in Kansas, Nevada, and New Mexico. held by companies he'd never heard of, but ones I controlled entirely. And Brielle. She believed her career was untouchable. For someone so smart, she never imagined that her father had access to her cloud storage, never guessed that her supposedly deleted audio files had long been copied, transcribed, and indexed. I waited, patiently, until they gave me the excuse, until they slid that manila envelope across the table at the party and thought I would break. That was the green light. Back at Cassandra's house, Travis had just burst through the door. "I can't access the trust," he shouted. "Everything's gone. Dad locked me out of everything." Cassandra spun on him. "What do you mean gone?" "I mean the properties, the equity. I called the manager. He says I was removed as beneficiary months ago. He said Dad signed it over to someone named Southbridge Advisory, but there's no record of it." Brielle's phone buzzed. She stared at the screen and went pale. "They're opening an emergency hearing at the Bar Association. My license is under review." Travis turned to Cassandra, eyes wide with panic. "What the hell is happening?" But she was already dialing Edward. He didn't answer. He was too busy watching his condo security camera footage rewind to the moment he realized his laptop had been accessed remotely. His entire client list, his private messages, everything. Watched their lives collapse in real time. And I didn't feel satisfaction. Not really, just release. They had never asked what I did before banking, never cared that I served in military intelligence or trained in psychological operations. They thought I was boring, predictable, weak. But the best moves are the ones they never see coming. That morning, I sent a private note to my brother, Raymond. Phase 1 complete. On to exposure. Let's see how they handle a life without my shadow to hide in. I'd often wondered what it would look like, watching them unravel. I imagined screaming, maybe pleading, chaos, desperation. But reality turned out far more poetic. It came in waves, quiet, measured, devastating, like a symphony of collapse playing out exactly as I composed it. Cassandra stood in the center of our kitchen, her kitchen now, still barefoot, robe hanging loose, phone trembling in her hand. She had just finished a frantic call with our financial institution's fraud division, who politely confirmed that she was no longer authorized on any of the accounts. "But I'm his wife," she insisted. "Not legally. As of 3 days ago," the woman said. And then the phone line went dead. A fresh ping echoed through the room. This time, a foreclosure notice on the second mortgage. The one she didn't even know existed. The one I took out in silence to fund. "Their destruction." Brielle's voice rang from the living room, sharp and panicked. "They're calling a bar committee meeting. I've been named in 3 misconduct complaints and someone sent them recordings." "Recordings, Mom." Cassandra barely blinked. "I need to talk to Edward." Edward Carlson, the once polished financial advisor, now sat alone in his high-rise condo, sleeves rolled up, laptop glowing in front of him as he tried, futilely, to access his frozen client accounts. Each click met with red banners, SEC review. Pending unauthorized activity flagged system lockdown activated. The man had built his empire on secrets, quiet bribes, discreet trades, a portfolio of aggressive growth options that paid handsomely when no one asked questions. But now all his shadows were backlit by my spotlight. His hands shook as he reached for his whiskey glass. His email inbox dinged. Notice of license suspension, pending formal audit. He barely had time to process it before another notification popped up. Client class action filing, 28 participants. He stood abruptly, knocking the glass onto the floor. At the same time, Travis was across town, storming into the office of the Langford family trust attorney, only to be told, calmly, by a young paralegal, that his name had been removed from everything. "That's impossible," Travis shouted. "Mr. Langford submitted the document 6 months ago," she said. "The board approved it unanimously." "What board?" "The one he formed in your absence, sir." Travis, who had never earned $1 in his life without help, suddenly found himself broke, and no one was going to bail him out. That evening, Cassandra let herself into Edward's condo with the spare key she had never returned. He stood in the center of the living room, jaw clenched, cheeks ruddy, hair disheveled in a way she had never seen before. "This can't be Marcus," she said, voice trembling. "He wouldn't do this. He's too mild." Edward let out a dry, humorless laugh. "He withdrew 200 grand in $20,000 bundles across 20 branches. That's not panic. That's planning." Cassandra crossed her arms. "Then stop it. You know his systems better than anyone." "I thought I did," Edward snapped. "But every time I try to trace the trail, it splits into 10 more. Do you understand what he's done? The paper trail is a maze." Cassandra opened her mouth to respond, but the condo lights flickered briefly. They both froze, and then, from the hallway, a calm voice spoke. "You two always did underestimate me." I stepped into the room quietly, dressed in the same charcoal gray coat Cassandra bought me for our trip to Vienna 10 years ago. Edward's face turned ghost white. How did you get in here?" "The same way I got into your accounts," I said, walking to the center of the room. "Your emails, your offshore holdings, your passwords were predictable. Cassandra's birthday, amateur move." Cassandra stepped back, stunned. "You've been spying on us?" "No," I said. "I've been observing. There's a difference. I didn't need to manipulate anything. I just let you talk, and plan, and conspire." Edward fumbled with his phone, but I calmly raised a hand. "Don't bother. The signal here's blocked. I should call the police." I tilted my head. "You want to explain to the police why your apartment was logged into by the SEC 3 hours ago? Or maybe why your latest client portfolio was rerouted through 3 Caribbean shell companies with your signature?" He faltered, sweat beading at his temple. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small voice recorder, and hit play. Edward's voice came out clear as crystal. "Once Marcus signs the pension papers, we'll have everything. He's too tired to fight." Cassandra's followed, soft and smug. "He won't even notice the second trust. I'll handle it. He trusts me." Her voice cracked in the present. You recorded us?" "For 15 years. I took a seat on Edward's leather chair and crossed my legs. "You see, I installed a fail-safe system, a dead man switch. If I don't reset it every 24 hours, everything goes public. Every file, every voice memo, every receipt." Edward collapsed onto the edge of the sofa, face slack. "What do you want?" he whispered. I stood again, slowly, buttoning my coat. "Nothing," I said. "Not from you." I turned to Cassandra. Her eyes were glassy, mouth slightly open as if trying to form a plea. But she said nothing. I moved toward the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. "You always thought I was too weak to fight," I said softly. "But I don't need to fight." I looked over my shoulder, locking eyes with Edward. "I won't touch you. I'll let the truth devour you instead. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine was served in a 5-star hotel conference room, under crystal chandeliers and surrounded by velvet drapes that would soon be flung wide open to the truth. It had taken a month to set the stage, long enough for Cassandra, Brielle, and Travis to feel the weight of consequence, but not yet the collapse. They were struggling, yes, but still clinging to the hope that they could fix it, redirect the narrative, cover the tracks. So I gave them a lifeline, an invitation. The email was sent through a law firm shell, branded with official headers and signed by a fabricated mediator. The subject line read, "Settlement and Confidential Mediation, Langford Estate and Holdings." Date: Friday, 11 Sags. AM location: the Avalon Grand Hotel, downtown San Diego. Attendees: Cassandra Langford, Brielle Langford, Travis Langford. I knew they'd show. The illusion of control was too tempting. They still believed they could talk their way out of this. Cassandra arrived first. Her heels clicked authoritatively across the marble lobby as she swept past reception in a tailored gray pantsuit. A folder of documents clutched in her hand, lips pressed tight, chin high, trying to maintain the illusion that she still had power. Brielle came next, dark sunglasses masking the turmoil beneath. She wore a navy sheath dress, her phone in constant motion as she dictated notes, trying to salvage her shattered legal career. Travis stumbled in 10 minutes late, wearing a sports coat over a wrinkled t-shirt. He reeked of desperation, his eyes bloodshot, his hands fidgeting like he hadn't slept in days. They were shown into conference room C, spacious, opulent, and deliberately theatrical. A long mahogany table stretched across the center. A silver pitcher of water sat untouched. No mediator, no documents. Just a silent projector, screen rolled up behind velvet curtains. Cassandra's mouth twisted. This isn't right. Maybe. They're running late, Brielle offered, seating herself but glancing suspiciously at the empty chairs. The door closed behind them with a soft click. They never noticed it lock. Downstairs in the grand foyer, reporters began to gather. Quietly, at first, then more boldly. Local stations, national legal correspondents, even a few stringers from financial publications. Each one had received an anonymous tip. Major financial corruption case tied to Langford Holdings. Evidence to be revealed at Avalon Grand, 11 a.m. 10 minutes later, federal agents arrived. 3 from the SEC, 2 from the IRS, and a third wearing the windbreaker of the State Bar Investigations Unit. The concierge tried to intervene until he was handed a subpoena. Upstairs, in the conference room, the projector screen flickered to life. The curtains drew themselves back automatically, revealing the full display. There was no preamble, no warning. The first video began playing, hidden footage from Edward's condo. Cassandra and Edward sitting on his sofa. Once Marcus signs, we move the funds, it's already queued. He won't question it, Cassandra said. He's too tired, too loyal. The color drained from her face. Brielle's hand flew to her mouth. Travis stood up, backing toward the door, but it didn't open. The second video played, Brielle in her office on a call with an unnamed partner. Just make the evidence disappear. No one's going to miss this guy. He's already guilty in the court of public opinion. Let's close this win. An email thread followed, appearing on screen in timed order, backing up every claim. Subject lines, attachments, case names, timestamps. The third section showed Travis's betting logs, side by side with transfers from Langford trust funds. The amounts matched to the dollar. Then came accounting spreadsheets, forged authorizations, voice memos, and screenshots, all assembled into a damning visual collage of betrayal and financial crime. None of them could speak. They were being tried, in a courtroom of public opinion, and I was both prosecutor and judge. From a secure room across the hotel, completely out of sight, I triggered the final component. Recorded video began to play, and there I was, projected 6 feet tall on the wall behind the table. I sat calmly in a chair, wearing the same suit they saw me in on retirement night. My voice was even, unshaken. At my retirement dinner, my wife and children handed me divorce papers, said I was finished, that my pension belonged to them, that I was nothing. The camera zoomed slightly as I stared into the lens. What they didn't know was that I had seen this coming for 15 years, that I spent every single one of those years preparing, not just to protect myself, but to show them what happens when you betray the man who built your world. The camera cut to Edward's face as he asked, "What do you want from me?" Then back to me, smiling. "Nothing, I don't need to destroy you. The truth will do that for me." The room was dead silent. Then the video faded to black. Reporters and agents flooded the hallway outside. Hotel security, under my private contract, waited to hold the Langfords inside until statements were taken. Cassandra pounded on the locked door. "Open it. This is entrapment. You have no right." A voice from behind the glass responded coolly. "Actually, ma'am, we do, and we have the warrants to prove it." Brielle sank into her chair, her hands trembling. Travis muttered, "He planned this, all of it, from the start." Cassandra finally sat down too, her chest heaving as her world disintegrated. For the first time, they all realized they weren't predators, they were prey. Back downstairs, a journalist from the Herald turned to an agent. Where is Marcus Langford? Now? The man just shook his head. No one knows, not even the feds. His accounts are clean. Paper trail ends in Belize. Up in the suite I'd rented under another alias, I watched it all unfold on a muted monitor. There was no satisfaction, only completion. The sand was warm beneath my feet, soft, powdery, untouched by anything but the tide and the wind. I didn't wear shoes anymore. Not here. Not in this life. A seagull cried overhead as the ocean rolled in, gentle and endless, the water so blue it looked unreal. The beach stretched wide in both directions, framed by palm trees and silence. I sat in a cushioned wooden chair outside, the small villa I now called home, a fresh cup of black coffee in one hand and my tablet in the other. The headlines greeted me like old friends. Cassandra Langford, indicted for financial fraud and conspiracy to embezzle pension funds. Disbarred. Brielle Langford stripped of license amid misconduct hearing, now working in hospitality. Travis Langford accepts plea deal, facing 5 years for wire fraud and misuse of trust assets. Carlson wealth collapses. Edward Carlson, cooperating with federal investigators after bankruptcy filing. Each article came with photos, tight-lipped mugshots, blurry courthouse steps, frantic interviews with no comment answers. I didn't smile. Not because I didn't feel vindicated, I did, but because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release. A quiet ping broke the silence. The secure line on my tablet flashed, green icon blinking. Only one person had this number, I answered. Roman, I said. My brother's voice crackled through the satellite connection, gruff and familiar. They're finally facing sentencing next week. I saw. Are you coming back? I looked out at the endless sea, the slow tide dragging light across the shore. No, I said. I've given them enough of my life. There was a pause. You sure? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, let the justice system finish what I started. Roman exhaled. You did good, Marcus, the quiet kind of good. Surgical, elegant, clean, I agreed. We sat in silence for a few seconds more, like soldiers who no longer needed to. So then he added, softer, any regrets? I stared out at the horizon. The world had never felt so wide. Only that I waited so long to see them for who they really were. Roman didn't say anything after that. He didn't need to. After I hung up, I stood slowly and stretched. My body still moved with the discipline I learned years ago. I'd kept myself sharp. Morning swims, quiet jogs along the sand, a strict diet, no alcohol. My mind, even sharper. Everything I'd built back in the States, every cent, every name, every move was now irrelevant. It had all served its purpose, and now it was time to let go. I walked back to the chair, picked up the tablet, and opened my final program, the last link to my past, the monitoring system, dozens of quiet feeds, still active, still watching. Bank, accounts, email alerts, legal dockets, surveillance backups, all of it running smoothly. All of it still feeding me the latest on the family that once plotted to take everything from me. I hovered over the final command for a moment. Delete all tracking data, confirm deletion. Yes, Noi tapped yes. The screen went black. Just like that. They were no longer mine to watch. I left the tablet on the chair, still and silent. The wind tousled my shirt as I stepped down toward the shoreline. Waves curled softly around my ankles, and I felt the tug of the ocean. Gentle. Cleansing. In the end, I didn't dismantle them with rage. I dismantled them with clarity. Piece by piece, move by move, not a single scream, not a single threat. Just quiet decisions made long ago, executed with precision. They thought they were clever. They thought betrayal was a shortcut to power, but they were short-sighted. They played checkers, played chess, and I always knew the game would end with checkmate.